So Steve, it's official now. You are the brother, also known as the father of,
AKA.
of which you guys keep flipping my brain around backwards and upside down here. But we're going to consider you maybe as part of the Beaver family.
Yes. The oldest one living.
So you're going to be, if you don't mind sharing, at least a year older?
I am 2 years older,
Okay.
a little over 2 years older.
So, are you the oldest in the family?
I am the oldest sibling.
Okay. Do you have any memory of your other siblings coming along? Do you have any?
Well, back then I didn't, it was just another kid, but there was probably one that came along, and that was Randy. That mom was off in the hospital, she was delivering, and we were, all of us, Tom, myself, we were at the neighbor's house in a pool. They had a above ground pool at the time. And when mom brought Randy home, we had to all rush home to see the baby. So that's one of the important ones, I guess, that crossed my mind. Another one would be the youngest one of the family, that would be Jeff. There's 21 years difference between Jeff and myself. So that was quite an interesting too.
Did you all get along?
Yes, we did all get along. We were all raised, and most of us were out by the time we were 18 or 21 years old. We moved out of the house, got married, and raised a family.
So going back, your dad, your brothers and sisters are there. How did you get to allot the various chores, and or did you not like one chore that was given to you, so you asked whoever to assign you to another chore? Do you remember how any of that worked?
No, not really, because it was all fun, and we thought that we were helping out on the farm. Both Tom and I, as the cows came in, we were responsible for washing the udders before they went through the milking process. There was one old Holstein cow on the farm that she always came in the outdoor. She was always the first cow in the barn and the first one milked. And she knew that she was always the first one. And I think her name was Sally, if my name serves me correctly. But I enjoyed telling that story about she was always in there.
We could call her Alpha Cow?
We can call her Alpha Cow, sure.
Didn't know there was that kind of order, but.
Yeah.
So your earliest memories of helping on the farm were, just kind of give me a pretty much detail as much as you remember helping on the farm.
Well, there again, in the dairy operation, washing the cattle, driving the tractors. I had a couple of years on my brother for driving the tractors, but we pretty much both started at the same time. He could always back a wagon better than I could. And he had the dexterity, and I guess he still does today, because he can play the guitar and things like that. He's just got that knack, that it's the patience and dexterity that he can handle. Out in the field baling hay, we were after I can remember, we were probably 11 and 9 respectively. We actually had an operation in the field where we didn't have to pick up the hay by hand. At times, there was an attachment on the truck that my brother's and myself's responsibility was to go along, run ahead of the truck, and I always liked to do this. We would stand the bales of hay up on end, and then when the truck came along, it had a mechanism that would shoot the bale of hay right up on top of the truck. And that was always an enjoyment to do.
What is that?
No.
Yeah,
He knows.
I do. I don't know what it was called, but because we never saw it certainly after we left the farm, and we were too young at that point to care, because we were just having fun on the farm, just running along next to the truck.
You didn't have any thrashing equipment?
No.
How did they get done?
They went out. They had a sickle bar mower, and it was kind of an interesting process. My father would usually cut the hay down with the sickle bar and crimp the hay. My grandfather, his expertise was raking it, And he would be out, sometimes till late in the evening, cutting hay, raking hay, and, preparing it to bale.
Yeah, describe this rake.
The rake was not one that you would see today. Back in the, say, 70s, they had these round wheels with spikes on them, and you could adjust them all which ways. All they had back then was a single cylinder, if you will, and you could angle it, and that's the way they raked the hay back then.
It wasn't like a tedder.
No. No.
Did you ever full with loose hay?
No. No, we always had the bales with the wire on them, and most of them had three wires on them.
And they were not the round bales.
That's correct. They were heavy bales. Those things weighed more than what we did, and we were picking them up and moving them around, and always trying to manipulate them into an elevator to try to carry them up to the top of the hayloft, or we might be up in the top of the hayloft with the hay as it came over, and you just, you didn't know if you wanted to try to catch it or just get out of the way of it because it was so heavy. And we were also, we would put grain up. We had specific areas that we would put grain, the oats, the barley, and such, and we would make our own feed back then. We would mix the grain, we'd mix the corn, the oats, and so forth. Add the molasses as we fed the cows.
So you had your own oats?
Yes, we raised them right there on the farm, and it was oats and straw, and nothing went to waste.
Well, if you had the oats, how did you thrash it?
Well, it was a combine. It was a combine, yeah.
Where did that come from?
Well, that was a piece of equipment that was bought, and gosh, I don't remember if it was pulled by the tractor or if it was a single machine. I think that it was pulled by the tractor, if memory serves me correctly.
It was the farm.
It belongs to the farm, yes.
Did you ever go around to other farms and combine with them?
No. No. We had enough to do on that farm to keep us busy.
So, at that time period, when you were young, and you think back, and you said, what's my favorite piece of equipment to use at that time period?
It was probably the John Deere tractor. I think that was, with kids and even afterwards, it was always that tricycle wheel tractor, because you very seldom saw the wide stance on the front end. And most of the time, there were all the bicycle type or tricycle type of wheels. They had two of them. They were about that close together. That was always my favorite.
And you drove that during planting?
Well, we did mostly the cultivation after, we were old enough to realize that we're supposed to be cultivating the wheels and not the corn, and keep it going in a straight line. But yes, they kept the important stuff for the grown-ups. But we did run the disc harrow, we did run the drags, the spring tooth harrows, things like that over the field, something that we couldn't screw up.
How about during harvesting? Did you get to do any driving then?
Very, very little. We were always the grunts. We were always strong boys growing up together, and we were always on the ground. If we had to throw hay up, I'm talking about after, say, 14 years old, that we were always there to do that. But as far as the harvesting goes, we really didn't do too much of that, because they had older hands that would do that.
What do you think of the modern no-till that farmers are using today versus you had the plow and you discs and you dragged it and you did all this?
Well, I think it's a whole lot less expensive, obviously, to do it with the no-till, but I'm not sure what it does for the environment, because a lot of them are using too much of it, and I think some of it is actually running into the bay and other tributaries, well water.
Well, in addition to the big machinery that you have to have in order to even plant by that method.
Right.
Can't use a little tractor.
No.
And have a $500,000 machine.
Did you find that you had different hobbies than your brothers and sisters?
He was probably a little more interested in the girls when he was old enough. But we all, both of us, we like to get out and ride our bicycles. He had his We both helped Dad with the chickens and things like that. We really didn't have any hobbies. We were always, if we weren't going to school or putzing around on the farm, that was pretty much full time for us.
Did anybody ever get injured on the farm?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I think my dad first had his first back injury on the farm, but that was not something that, a piece of equipment caused. It was just he tried to lift something or he turned wrong and hurt his back. But as far as injuries on the farm that was caused by mechanical means, I can't think of any.
How did he get through that? I mean, who helped him? How was it working in those days with medical services?
Well, I think during that period of time, he had probably 2 surgeries between the time that he first had the first one and then before or just right after we moved off the farm. Pretty much gutted himself through it. He pulled a real gut check. He was a tough man, and he worked through a lot of pain. Didn't have workers' comp. You were off.
So who jumped in to keep things going?
Well, I think that they had the hands that were there, had to step up and probably work a few more hours. I know that the first surgery that he had, he was required to do a lot of sit-ups and things like that. My brother and I, we thought it was fun. We thought we were playing with Dad. We'd always lay across his feet while he's doing these sit-ups. And we didn't realize that was helping him get better in some aspects. Today, they don't want you necessarily doing that. But I always said the worst thing he ever did was have his back worked on, but that's another story.
When you were children making your own bows and arrows and the arrows, and you shot them at each other and all that, who did you emulate in the way of?
Well, I guess that, we grew up around the Lone Ranger and Tonto. And of course, we would have the masks, and in those days, you could buy the Lone Ranger's gun or a replica of it. And it was metal or plastic, and it was shaped like a gun. Whereas in today, if you took something like that down in one of these cities, you're going to get shot because you're carrying a weapon. And back then, it was the whole state of mind with people were a lot different. Bang bang, you're dead. It was nothing to say that to your brother or your friend that came over. It didn't mean anything. And today, you can't do that.
We made our bows out of a piece of stick.
And just a piece of string, binder's twine. And we just pulled some straight sticks and we kind of notched it a little bit off of the tree. And they weren't very accurate. And fortunately, nobody got hurt.
You made our own slingshot.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. In the later years, we were probably a couple of the kids in the neighborhood. Both of us had 22s. And we were only 13, 14 years old, I think, at the time.
Now, assuming you had a woods or woodlot, do you remember anything you did in the woods?
Well, we would always go with Dad hunting squirrels. And we would come in from school and say, "Where's Dad?" And Mom would say, "He's up to hunt squirrels." And Tom and I would go up into the woods hunting him down. And we generally knew where he hunted. And Dad would shoot a squirrel, and we'd kind of take a mark on it just where it was. And once he was ready to go home, he had of course, back then they didn't really have limits. They were rather plentiful. And we would go hunt the squirrels down, and because we knew where they fell.
What kind of guns did you have?
Dad had an old broken down single shot 12 gauge shotgun, which I still have today. And I'd be afraid to fire it because it's not in the best of shape, but I'm sure it would take maybe a few dollars to get it back to where it would look original, look new.
Is that the only one?
That was primarily the only one that he ever shot. And then afterwards, he did fire a 22, just a single shot 22, I think. And he was a pretty good shot.
Did you have BB guns?
Not too much, no. Not really.
You either did or you didn't?
No. I remember the BB guns, but, I don't remember having one per se.
Okay. Did you, so you stayed with the farm for how long?
We were there on the farm at Halen's until 65, I believe. And then we moved to Clarksville. And then Dad he was still working for Rouse at that point. And he had probably 150 acres, I'm just guessing, that he had free range to raise his cattle. He had a real good working relationship with James Rouse. And he was allowed to, I think he was raising 25, 40 head of cattle there, beef cattle. And he had just free reign with just about anything he wanted to do on the property. And at a real good price.
Isn't that home still there?
Yes, yes. That big old stone house is still there. And my mother still lives there.
So you grew and you changed from that and you went into what?
I went into land development, and my brother went to the building maintenance end of the thing. And we went and we built. I went to work for a Mark Wakefield, who is he's long since passed. And we developed Woodmark, and we developed Farside. And he had bought a big piece of property down off of at the time, Route 32 in Annapolis Junction. And he bought that at just the wrong time, that he waited and he waited and he waited. And it kind of killed him because the money never came through for the road. So he ended up passing away. I left the land development business, and which we were building at the time. They were probably $250,000 to $300,000 homes. These were big homes. Today's standards, they're a medium-sized house. And they were on 3 acres of ground, and I was responsible for maintaining the grounds in the developing area. And then I worked, after he passed away in '82, I went to work in a stone quarry right up here off of Marriottsville Road, worked for Joe Vinci for a couple of years. And then I went to work for another land developer, MDG Companies. It's Patrick McEwen. He was well known around Columbia area. And it happens that we were kind of in the same neighborhood as my brother. And we did land developing. We developed Columbia 100 there, right off of Route 100, just about a mile east of Route 29. And he also developed a piece of property called Gaither Farm, right off of 108. And I worked for him up until about 4 or 5 years ago. And we towards the end of that relationship, we went into a property management because there was very little property left to develop in Howard County. So, for the last 10 or 15 years, I've been in the property management, and my brother was kind of doing the same thing in the same area, and we were neighbors. And the funny thing of it was, one of his responsibilities at the time was he had to go around and check individual owners to see if there were any deficiencies or anything that was done where they shouldn't have been done, fences, things like that were put up. And he had to come to me and kind of try to push me in a direction to try to make me do repairs. But it's kind of interesting the way things worked out, as we ended up working together but on opposite sides of the fences, so to speak. And we're both, now I'm in property management and building maintenance, as well as he's doing the same thing today.
Interesting. So, it's interesting how parents influence kids. Kids wind up realizing that they have certain qualities from their parents that they picked up along the way. Give me an idea of what you thought were the incredible qualities of your dad.
I guess Dad always, probably one of the biggest qualities he had a way of making things work. When it broke down, he could fix it. There was very little, unless he needed a welder. And in his later years, probably 10 years before he passed away, if he needed a welder, he would be out there welding it himself. He just had that knack of being able to do things.
And your dad's name?
George.
So that's pretty valuable to have on a farm.
Yes, because when things broke down, he was able to fix them.
He's asking if you want to go.
No,
You're fine? Okay. You got anything else? I want to ask you about comparing now and farm life. So we asked this to your brother, and you already heard it, but we want to compare your early days of experiencing farm life and how it worked to today's lifestyle farm and how it works.
I think it's the difference between night and day, because growing up, we had no apprehension at all about going out and getting our hands dirty and doing some work, whether it was putting our hands in the ground, harvesting the crops. It was when we had the tomato farm. My brother and I would carry irrigation pipes out. The kids today, farm-related wise, they're not going to do that. If it involves work today, they don't want to do it. But it's much easier to farm, I guess, today than what it was years ago, because they've got the equipment to do it and to handle it. They don't need so much the manpower. That's the biggest difference.
Your vegetable garden, who maintained that mostly, the girls or the boys?
The boys, they really did. My grandfather was big into vegetable gardening, and he could raise anything. And even after he had a bout of diabetes, he had lost a leg, and he was out working the garden. And this was later years, but he was out working the garden and driving his own automobile with a wooden leg. But mom's responsibility, she'd go out and most of the times gather the eggs, but mom had a full-time job just raising the kids and preparing the meals. It was usually, if it wasn't my dad or, it was probably the brothers that were out there trying to help to harvest the crops out of the gardens and things.
So the brothers actually harvested it as opposed to the girls going out?
Oh, yeah.
To get a head of cabbage?
Yes.
And dig up some beets? And
Yes.
carrots?
Yes.
The boys would do that?
Yes.
I can see the boys hoeing and pulling the weeds.
We did it all because it was a timing thing, because at the point the girls hadn't come along yet, because I'm the oldest, and then Tom, and then Susan. There's 6 years between me and her. So, by the time that had come about, she wasn't old enough yet. So she wasn't out there. So it was usually Tom or I or my dad that were tending the chickens and such.
In hindsight, Mom had a strong role in farm life. I'm sure you're going to agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But could you describe how she motivated and integrated in maintaining that farm lifestyle?
Mom would help out on the farm. If it come to baling hay or somebody needed to drive a truck, she was out there doing it. It was wherever she was needed. If we needed her in the field, she was out in the field. If we needed her on the back of the truck to pull the bales off the hay, to put in the elevator, she would do that. She did anything that she had to do to help Dad and to help get him in the house sooner.
Yeah, and as they mentioned, and he mentioned it in this year, 2016, his mother's still alive.
Yeah. Yep.
First name?
Betty. Yep. She's still alive. She's still living in that stone house that they've been in since '65. And she'll be there, I guess, till the day she dies.
She's quite a lady.
Yep.
Oh, you know that.
That's his mother and his mother. Right, sir?
So, Granddad, you got to spend a little time with Granddad?
Yes, we did. He would always take us into, I forget where he used to take us. He used to take us down to Clark's. Used to take us to, there was a small store called Paul's Market down in Ellicott City, right on Main Street. He would take us there. But I don't know if you're going to cut this out. But one of my memories of him, he was a big red man chewer. And he had no qualms about, you can cut this, about hanging his head out the window, and just, out it went. So that was,
It's ready.
well, it is. I mean, you got to do it. You got to do it. But he was interesting, trying to, because his wife, my grandmother, she was a contrary lady, and he always lived to please her. She was the matriarch, so to speak, of the Beaver clan. And she's been gone for many years, but she was a tough woman. And he always, when she said jump, he jumped. How high? But no, my grandfather was, when he died, he had a full head of white hair, snow white hair. And all the rest of us, it's gone.
What was your first memories of a television set?
Oh my goodness, I can tell you.
Assuming sooner or later you got one.
Well, yeah, we do. It was a console, just a black and white set. We always used to watch cartoons in the mornings when we weren't out there, and like Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings. One of my memories is with the phone systems. Is back then you had the party lines. Is you didn't have your own line. There might be 3 or 4 people on that line, and each person had their own ring. Some had a double ring, some had 3, some had 2 and a short or something. But it was interesting growing up in that time period where electric went out. We just resorted to the fireplace. We cooked in the fireplace.
Did you ever go to the movie theater in Ellicott City?
Yes. I can't remember what we saw, but right there on Columbia Road and Main Street, yes, we did go in there. I think I've only been in there one time, and I was probably 9 or 10 years old. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, we went there almost every Saturday since Dad wanted to see the serials.
Did you?
They would continue to eat.
Right. We went in to see a movie, but I couldn't begin to tell you what it was.
Saturday was cheap.
Yeah.
Sunday was too expensive.
Right.
They were Technicolor.
Oh, well, I remember watching my first color program growing up, and it was The Wizard of Oz. And the kids just thought that was the greatest thing. The lady up on top of the hill had got a color television set when we were living over at Halen's. And we went up and watched the Wizard of Oz in color, and it stood out.
Granddad, did we establish his name?
Paul?
Paul. So did you ever observe Paul and, let's put it in family terms, your granddad and your dad talking about farm problems, talking about farm expansion, talking about changes to the farm, any of that type of observations?
No, not really. It was just more or less directions. Dad would tell, my grandfather, and that's usually the way that it worked. Dad would tell my grandfather where he needed to go and do what, and that was pretty much all the communication that they had.
And Granddad Paul did what?
Well, we all lived on the farm together. And my grandfather, I don't remember him in the dairy end of it, but I do remember him in the crop end of it. And he generally helped with the crops, I believe.
You mentioned Halen Farm several times. How was your family and bachelors tied together?
We lived on the farm that was owned by another gentleman, and the Baslers owned a piece of property over where the Howard County Hospital is right now. And after Rouse came in, and they were, I think, trying to negotiate a deal with Basler to buy his place, and so I think Rouse and Basler worked out a trade. Rouse owned Halen Farm, Basler owned the property that they wanted, so they just kind of made a deal, and Basler ended up with Halen Farm, and Rouse ended up with the property where Basler had.
Yeah, Cedar Lane.
Yeah, yep, had the airstrip and everything, both places.
What was interesting about that airstrip in 1961, a group of old Army World War II veterans, paratroopers, they went into sport jumping, and they jumped at that Al Basler's
Really?
airport.
Okay.
And they had to leave because the planes that were coming in to approach Friendship Airport, and they had to come in nose high attitude. They couldn't see parachutes. So they said, something's got to be done. They got to get off of our airway.
Uh-huh.
So then they went up to...
Up to Shepherd's, up to Halen's.
They went up to Clee Mill Road.
Okay. Okay.
Can you think of anything you want to add?
No, I mean, there was a period of time on the old farm, and we thought it was a fascinating place. On the back of the farm, one of the hands that did work on the farm in the early years, there was an old log cabin that was back on that place. And all it had, I think, was 2 rooms in it. And you had to cross the stream and go up through the field in order to get there. But he lived in that house, I think, for a couple of years. And I guess it was there until Basler bought the farm and went in and, physically started tearing everything down and building places to bury stumps and things like that. So I'm almost certain it's not there anymore.
I can't think of anything.
I think we've covered everything.
And you thought you were just gonna take a couple minutes. You did great.